If you're a woman facing Christmas with thoughts of separation on her mind, then this is the video for you. Today, in the first of two videos, myself, a financial advisor who works exclusively with divorcing women, Teena Dhanota Jones, head of family law at Partners Solicitors in London, and Dr. Anne, a psychologist specialising in trauma and high conflict divorce, are going to share our key guidance to support you and give you some direction at this time, covering the emotional, financial and legal queries that might be keeping you awake at night over Christmas. And in January, we'll go into more depth in a follow-up video to help prepare you on all fronts. So let's start by just finding out a little bit more about myself, Dr. Anne and Teena, and then we'll go into some guidance and some hints and tips to really help you over this period. Dr. Anne, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm a psychologist with over 30 years experience, and I now specialise in working with professional women who are in the midst of a high conflict divorce. So that's when the divorce process isn't kind of going as exactly to plan. So my specialism is really looking at people who are maybe coming out of a relationship of coercion and control, where there's been a real pattern of some sort of low-lying abuse, and generally in a psychological and a financial manner that it's been played out. And what I do is I help my clients quickly understand the dynamics of what they're facing so that they can get through the divorce in a much more healthy way, so that they can protect themselves and they can get on with their life as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Love it. I love it. And tell us a little bit about you.
My name's Teena. I'm a matrimonial solicitor with over 20 years experience. I deal with a variety of aspects within matrimonial law, acting for a variety of clients, from needs-based to high net worth.
Thank you, Teena. And so I'm Ceri, I'm a financial advisor. And as I said, I work exclusively with women who are getting divorced. And specifically, I work with women who are divorcing wealthy and powerful men. I'm on a mission to remove financial vulnerability and disadvantage for these women. And I've got a vision of a future where it's easy and attractive for women to be money savvy. So that's what I'm all about. And today we're going to share eons and eons and eons of tips and advice for you. So we've done it in a question format, and there's 4 questions we're going to answer. I'm going to put them to Teena and to Dr. Anne, and we're going to get each of our perspectives. So we'll get the emotional, the financial and the legal perspective on those questions. Take us around half an hour, we think, and then you'll have a chance to kind of get that overview of things that should be on your mind at this period. And then in January, we'll go into some depth about some more things that you can take forward. So ideally, what you'll take away from today is some practical hints and tips, some actions that are, implementable quite quickly, and some reassurance. So let's start with you, Dr. Anne, with the first question, which is, what things can clients be doing during Christmas or prior to Christmas to make sure that it goes as smoothly and as pleasantly as it possibly could, but still help them feel like they're getting ready for maybe some change, maybe some separation in the new year?
Okay, so this is 2 parts to this. The first is, having to survive the Christmas. Now, if you're in a relationship that is at the point that you're seriously considering separation, it's not going to be the most pleasant emotional, psychological position you're in. So you really need to kind of accept that. Now, a lot of women, put a lot of pressure on themselves to make Christmas something that's uber special. And that extra pressure is just going to add to the difficult emotional situation they're in. So they really need, first and foremost, to be grounded and be realistic. Okay, this is Christmas. It's not, it's not something that has to be built into the most amazing thing ever. The children are going to like it as long as mum is relatively stable and happy, and, there's Santa's coming, and they'll be in that magical excitement anyway. So don't overstretch yourself. Yeah. You're already going to be overstretched emotionally, dealing with the fact that you're really contemplating perhaps this marriage has come to an end and I just need to get through this time. If you are seriously considering that this is the decision you want to make, then use this time to go online and find some resources. So, if you're still at that, maybe will I not? This is a really good time to find a divorce coach. Go and find one who'll be able to sit you through in the new year, and you can really examine whether this is what you want to do or not. If you're at the point where you've made that decision, then it's going to be about, resourcing somebody like Teena who can come in and then can start advising you. If you suspect that the reason that you're coming out of this relationship is because there's a dynamic of something that is maybe a bit more malevolent in the power dynamic between you and your partner, I'd strongly suggest that you contact, a more specialist therapist who's going to help you prepare for what could potentially be ahead in the divorce. It may be that you don't know that yet, so it might be something just you need to bear in mind for the future as a possibility. For sure, let friends and family know what's going on. So if you need to get out of this situation, out of that environment for a bit to decompress, you've got somewhere to go. Even if it's for an hour or 2 hours, you're going to need to get used to being able to find social support. So it's really important that you start taking those steps now.
Brilliant, thank you. And Teena, is there anything from a legal perspective that that these women can be doing prior to or during Christmas that might help and kind of be useful to be taking steps they could be taking just now?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Anne. That's really helpful and insightful, all really, really relevant. There are steps that an individual can take, but they're not necessary steps. It's how you feel during this period. So I'm going to give a list, but it's not the final list, and it's not a definitely I must do list. It's bits and pieces, what you feel you can cope with. So I would say, firstly, discreetly locate and retain your marriage certificate. You will need it if and when you decide to issue your proceedings. If you can't find it, don't worry, you can be advised at a stage that you feel ready to from a solicitor as to how you can get a copy in any event. It's always useful to have an idea of your financial situation, a snapshot at Christmas. And I always find it's beneficial to obtain an up-to-date mortgage redemption statement in the property that you live and maybe any other properties that you own. It's always a good idea to check and record the balances of bank accounts, other assets and investments, which are in your name and joint names, and within which you think you may have a beneficial interest or a joint beneficial interest with your partner. If you feel able to and have access to, it is useful to have a hard copy of the balances of these assets with a date, so we know at this time this is what the figures were. It will help us in the future just to make sure there's been no deliberate dissipation of assets. What I always find that I really need at the onset of a first meeting is a chronology. It's hugely, hugely important, because I need to know the pertinent events relevant to your marriage, including the dates of those events. So if you can prepare or think of preparing a chronology of the salient points in your relationship, for example, the date you married, the date you began to live together, the date of your marriage, the ages and dates of birth of your children, that's a really, really good starting point. So if you do decide to proceed, all those dates are at the forefront of your mind, and it's information that will be required that would assist your solicitor to give you some initial advice.
Fabulous, thank you. Really practical things to be thinking about and kind of getting your head around. And Anne, am I right in thinking if you're doing some things that are quite practical, that can help you feel that you're more in control and might actually help emotionally through that period as well?
Yeah, I mean, that can be a double-edged sword, because if you're able, you're in a place that you can start to do those steps, then it will give you a sense of control. But if you're at the pre-contemplation step, if you're at the point where you're still not really sure and are still overwhelmed, then it's about saying, okay, I know this stuff is going to happen in the future. I now have a sense of where I'm going to, but I don't need to do it today. If getting through Christmas is all I can do, then that's enough. Your solicitor, will be able to, at that point, say, these are the things you need to do. And you've got that sense, but certainly don't put any more pressure on yourself to have it all done and dusted, you know, by Christmas Eve, for example.
Yeah.
Because getting through Christmas, even when you're not in this situation, for any mom is, you know,
It is
it's
so
a
true.
stress.
Yeah.
It is. It absolutely is. If you throw the elves into there and having to do that every day as well, yeah, it's enough to send anybody over.
And the sheep costumes that you have to buy and the Secret Santa, and, you know.
It's a lot, isn't it? Thank you. I think that's a really important thing to position here, is that the things that we're going to talk about, Teena and I, are things that you can do if you're feeling like you've got the capacity to. They're not essential, but these are things, if you're thinking, I just want to make use of this time, I want to kind of feel prepared, then they're useful. So from a financial perspective, it could be really useful to review your bank statements. It's a good idea to get some context and some understanding of what's coming in and going out, and getting some familiarity with that. And then in a really ideal world, almost creating a budget for that, although you'll get support from a financial planner and even from your solicitor if you haven't or aren't able to do that in advance. It's a really good idea to gather together any joint account statements and get some understandings of what you owe and what you own. So whatever you can do that wise can be really useful.
Could I just add, one of the things is as well, you know, some of the ladies watching this might be anxious just even with the nature of the conversation. But what I want to reassure them is there's lots of resources and women, you know, like yourself, Ceri, and Teena, who really understand this situation. So you're going to be in safe hands. You don't have to be ashamed or embarrassed that maybe some of this is completely overwhelming, because if you find a really good quality service provider who's experienced, they're going to hold your hand through this.
Actually, you are not alone in that sense that this happens to lots of women, that they don't feel connected to this. They weren't the one managing money within a relationship, and they have, you know, lost sight potentially on what they think they should know, and they do self-criticize and they do worry about the impact of that. But you're absolutely right, Dr. Anne, in terms of the support they can find legally and financially, there are many of us who specialize in this type of work, who work with clients in this exact situation, and we've got the tools and the guidance to be able to create and support when that knowledge doesn't exist. So yeah, that's really key. But if you can, you know, if you're able to do that, that's a useful thing to do. If you're in a relationship where you haven't necessarily been the money manager, where you haven't had access necessarily to money yourself, or where everything has just been managed jointly or by him, and you don't have a sole bank account, that can be something that can be really useful to discreetly set up. And consider doing that so that you can start to have some financial security and independence. So if you can discreetly and safely set up your sole bank account, if you haven't got one, it can be a good place to start to try and create an emergency fund, a place that you can put money that will support you through what might be coming ahead. So moving on, you've already touched on this, Dr. Anne. I don't know if you've got anything else to follow up on it, but after Christmas, what expert support can women turn to? Is there anything that you can think of that might be really useful?
Well, during Christmas, you know, it depending on the first port of call is always going to be family and friends. You know, I wouldn't say necessarily you're going to be able to access a professional because of holidays, because of waiting lists, but you can certainly starting to source them. So you can start doing Google searches, look on LinkedIn, look on various, you know, chat boards, so Reddit threads, Facebook threads, groups. Other women who have been in the same situation, once you start to access their conversations, it becomes in itself quite a reassuring experience, because suddenly it's not just about what you're experiencing in your relationship. There's going to be lots of other women in similar situations, and they're going to have a wealth of information. So that's really going to be quite helpful. Definitely, I would say looking for the financial advisor like yourself, Ceri, because having somebody who's going to take you through those steps is vital. Most of my clients are kind of financially illiterate. they're very successful in the workplace, but the money hasn't been managed by them. So there's a lot of shame. So when they begin to have those conversations with those professionals, it really helps. Having a really good, supportive, empathetic, and also kind of feisty solicitor helps, so that the woman knows that she's going to be safe and she's going to be supported and somebody's going to fight her corner. So those sorts of expert guidances, you definitely can spend the time just starting to do the searches, because knowing that those professionals are out there are excellent. It just gives you this sense, okay, it's not just me on my own. I'm not the only one. If things get really bad, then you're looking at things like, okay, do I need to call Women's Aid if it's becoming extreme? If you feel that your mental health is suffering, maybe I need to speak to Samaritans. It's just to be able to reach out and have somebody listen to you, because a lot of women can be quite isolated. They haven't told family and friends, or maybe family and friends don't even believe them that it's that bad. So it's about saying, okay, I'm going to start developing a little network around me, a little network of resources. And if that's all you do over Christmas, then that's more than enough.
Love it. Teena, what thoughts have you got?
So having been in the industry for 20 years, generally, when a client comes to me, there has been some mental impact on them, and generally it's reactive depression. And when we see signs of that, our port of call is please liaise with the GP in the first instance and then go to counselling. So that's something we always do. And then later on, but fairly early on, if there's aspects of abusive behaviour, then somebody like Dr. Anne, and if somebody is having difficulties with their form readers, or somebody that we would refer to, such as yourself, Ceri. So they're the types of experts. It's also really, really important to get early advice from a matrimonial solicitor, because it's better to be fully informed at the onset of your matter, to understand the legalities before you decide to progress and even embark. It's just, you're then armed with the correct information. Unsurprisingly, a lot of solicitors do offer initial fixed fee meetings, and with me especially, they can last for one or 2 hours, and I always leave it with, there's no obligation to progress your matter. So a client can literally walk away, absorb the information that they've had, and just take their time. And some people will return in a month, in 6 months, 3 months. It really, really, really varies. And I think to give that space to a client when you've given them so much information is necessary. And then they need to turn to their other experts to get the support. People say, well, I can get information online. The difference between meeting a solicitor and the information online is that I can tailor the advice to your unique set of personal circumstances. And every marital breakdown is unique, because not everybody has children, not everybody has assets of X, not everybody has a family trust. So it enables me to fine tune the advice. And I find that clients will walk away with the confidence of having the bare bones of information that will enable them to make decisions.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you, Teena. I've got nothing to add. I think we've covered that. It's this idea of getting a team around you and shoring yourself up in the best way by having the right sounding boards and the right experts on your side. So yeah, I think what would be really good now is to explore what clients really shouldn't do over this period. Are there any kind of alarm bells or things that they really should be aware of that they shouldn't be doing? Teena, can we come to you first on this one?
Yes, so I'm a member of Resolution, and we are an organisation of family lawyers who are accredited, and we ensure we have a non-confrontational approach. So in every situation, my position will be, please do not antagonise or cause conflict, especially in with this scenario and during Christmas. So that would be my specific advice to the issue that we're dealing with at the moment. On a legal aspect, you shouldn't open post addressed to your partner or access any online accounts or learn about investments which are not in your name but are in your partner's sole name. If you see something that you shouldn't have seen, for example, if it's lying on the table and you've seen it, you're not allowed to pick it up, keep it, or photocopy it. But because it's been lying around, it means there's nothing wrong with looking at it and remembering it from memory, you can then relay that information to your solicitor, who can then make further inquiries about this information that may have come to your attention deliberately or accidentally. But just be careful not to keep it or retain it or copy it or give it to your solicitor. If there's children involved, obviously it's preferable to keep the children out of the conflict. And there's the issue of parental alienation that comes into this, which I think a lot of people are aware of. And you've got to be really careful not to be looking to be derogatory about your partner to the children because of this concept of alienation, which your solicitor could advise you on in further if and when you choose to take further advice.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think they are things that people are just not aware of. So yeah, really important. And I see a lot of this. I'm just going to follow up and say that from a financial perspective, things that you should be avoiding really are big financial decisions, such as big purchases, new properties, things like rearranging and taking a fixed rate on a mortgage, because they could all have a financial implication further down the line when we're trying to smoothly uncouple and get to a space where you each own the right assets in the property. And if you can lose some delaying tactics around those things, that can prove really fruitful later. Obviously, you need to keep yourself safe and you need to make sure that you're not necessarily showing your hand if you're not ready to. But if you can delay, that can certainly be worthwhile. Dr. Anne, what about you? Is there anything that clients really shouldn't do from your perspective?
Okay, so at risk of being a killjoy, I would say that alcohol is the big one. Because we're trying to avoid conflict over Christmas, because we're trying to kind of get through it and it be as harmonious as possible, then avoiding alcohol is one of the best things you can do, because with alcohol, we all know that we say or do things that we wouldn't necessarily want to say or do. And this is really about kind of getting through this time with as much dignity and as much psychological and emotional safety as possible. So, keep the alcohol to a minimum, because traditionally we know family Christmases around the issue of alcohol are going to be problematic. A relationship that's at the point of breaking, adding the alcohol is not going to be good. Bearing in mind that you're going to be, centralizing your children, that is about, again, keeping the conflict down as much as possible. And if you're in a relationship which does have a dynamic of underlying aggression and provocation, you're going to have to go in knowing that your partner at this time is going to be trying to push your buttons. So it's going to be something that you're going to have to even more keep an eye on your emotional regulation. And that's about whatever you need to do to be able to decompress, whether it's journaling, whether it's being able to listen to a meditation tape, whether it's going for a walk, anything you can do to just get through this time without the pressure cooker exploding.
Thank you. So our last question for today, which is about what resources these women can access to help them get through Christmas in the event that they need support really urgently. Do you want to take that one first, Teena?
Yeah. So this is obviously for situations that literally are or have been out of control, but there are resources available if you feel really unsafe at home and there's been actual or threatened violence, some level of intimidation, harassment and pestering. And some of you may have heard of the new legislation covering coercive control. Your first port of call at Christmas will be the police, and they are absolutely brilliant in these circumstances. I've had numerous clients that have gone through this, and they will really hold your hand. They'll put you in touch with the domestic violence unit, and they will facilitate and help you during this time. If you find that the police are not of significant assistance, you can turn to a family solicitor who can advise you about the possibility of pursuing some court applications. And that would be a non-molestation order and a possible occupation order. And they're there to protect you and hopefully enable you to live in the home without your abusive partner. If things get really bad, then the domestic violence unit local to where you live can put you in touch with a women's refuge. And it's all about looking after yourself and your children, and you've just got to do what you feel is right for you personally and the children. And it is a time to probably prioritize you if you're in that situation, rather than worry about the impact on everything else. So focus on you and the children, and resort to the police, a family solicitor, and or if it really becomes too difficult, the domestic violence unit, and consider a women's refuge.
And what do you think, Dr. Anne?
Well, I want to echo what Teena said there about prioritizing yourself, especially if you're in the situation where, you know, the aggression has got to such an extent that you're feeling in danger, that your personal safety or the safety of your children is at risk. A lot of women that I work with, they struggle to call social services, or they struggle to call emergency services, because they immediately start to think about the impact on their partner and what's that going to mean for him in the long run. I would say in these circumstances, let that play out as it will in the future. That's not your immediate concern. Your immediate concern is to make sure that you stay healthy and well. With that in mind, keep your mobile phone charged, keep it on your person, have a safety number that you can contact, so that, you know, if things get bad, you've got a family member or a friend who knows what, you know, that they need to come and rescue you. Talk to Women's Aid, start looking at those resources, start educating yourself, because escaping an abusive relationship is not an easy process. On average, it takes 6 or 7 attempts before a woman will get out of that situation. Even if it's not abusive, I have yet to meet the client that goes hopping and skipping to the divorce court. You know, they don't want to end their marriage. There's a process of decoupling. So there's a lot of pre-work before you even get to this point. So if you're watching this video, that means that you're pretty far along the pathway to making this decision. And that means that, you know, it is about saying, okay, in the future, after Christmas, what am I planning to do in terms of reaching out to different professional resources so that I can make the best decision for myself, and if you have children, for your children.
Thank you, Dr. Anne.
Mm-hmm.
From a financial perspective, I would just add that we have access to the money advice service. So, you know, any women who are feeling that they need to get some free advice, that's a good port of call and a good starting point. From a less urgent perspective, but certainly useful reading, if you have the time and capacity, is maybe looking at the Survival Guide to Pensions on Divorce. That can certainly help you feel prepared. And then there's resources like Smart Purse and other online resources that help you rebuild your confidence around finances, and that can be really useful. But absolutely safety first, and Women's Aid and the support and the direction that you can get from them is always a really good first port of call, because they will point you to the people that can help you in all of these areas. So that concludes the questions for today. I hope we have given you some grounding, some guidance, some clarity, and what you can do to get through this Christmas period. We're going to come back and we're going to help you in the new year too. We're going to dig into this deeper. If you've got any questions that you want to raise, then please do send them through to us. I'm going to put our links in the bio below so that you can do so. We'd be happy to answer those, and we'll take it further so that we can help you on this journey as you move forward through this uncoupling. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.